Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today I will analyze the case of Alison and Kevin Davis. First I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the alleged crime, then offer my analysis. Alison Davis was born on January 1, 1990, and lived in New Haven, Indiana. This is in northeastern Indiana, 6 miles east of Fort Wayne. Alison married a man named Kevin Ray Davis. He was about 6.5 years older than her. The couple rented a 1,500 square foot house on Douglas Lane. Alison worked at Victoria's Secret. Kevin was a landscaper. The couple would regularly consume alcohol at a local bar called East Haven Tavern, which was about a mile from their home. Now moving to the timeline of the alleged crime. On August 12, 2023, at 4:38 a.m., Alison Davis called 911 and said, "My husband just fell down the stairs and there's blood everywhere, and I can't flip him over. I don't know if he's alive or dead." The police arrived at Alison's house 3 minutes later. She took them inside to where Kevin was at the base of the stairway in a pool of blood. 40-year-old Kevin Davis was transported to Parkview Regional Medical Center in critical condition. He died about 8 hours later. Alison told the police that she and her husband met each other at the East Haven Tavern at 9 p.m. They drove separately. At about 1 a.m., Alison left the bar. Kevin left a few minutes later. He usually parked in the garage, and Alison would park in the driveway. So when she arrived home first, this presented a problem. She texted Kevin at 1:04 a.m., indicating that she had to urinate badly. She wondered how long he was going to be. It sounds like Alison had a transportation miscommunication and procrastination, leading to a parking allocation indetermination, the combination of which resulted in a hydration expansion elimination complication. After Kevin arrived home, he consumed more beers, and the couple argued. Alison slept downstairs on the couch while Kevin slept upstairs in the master bedroom. Later, a loud noise woke Alison up. She investigated and found Kevin face down at the base of the stairs. She said, "I thought he was just drunk and fell down the stairs." Alison tried to lift him, but was unable. This is when she called 911. The police were able to confirm that Alison and Kevin were at the bar earlier that night. Many people there recognized them. Again, the couple would go there frequently. At 2:34 a.m., Kevin sent a text message to a friend who had been at the bar with him. He indicated that he was putting his phone on silent. He then wrote, "Gotta go to bed, the wife." The police examined the area of the house where Kevin had been found. The steps were narrow, steep, and carpeted. The base of the staircase was floored with something like hardwood or simulated hardwood. The front entry door to the house was only about 3 feet from the bottom step. On the top of the newel post at the bottom of the stairs, there was a square post cap that was slightly raised in the center. This design is often referred to as peaked or classic. The police said they did not observe any damage to the walls of the front door consistent with Kevin tumbling down the stairs. They did not immediately search the master bedroom where Kevin had been sleeping because Alison said her pit bull was locked in that room. As the police were investigating, Alison was standing in front of the house. She spoke with various emergency responders. At one point, she laughed when talking with medics. Some of the police officers felt as though Alison's demeanor was odd, given the circumstances. Despite this, investigators assumed that Kevin's death was accidental. He must have fallen down the steps due to intoxication and died from whatever injuries he sustained in that fall. Nobody knew what those injuries were at this point. However, the detective in charge of the investigation released the scene of Kevin's death. With his permission, the area at the base of the stairway was cleaned. Staff at the ER where Kevin was treated had some concerns about the nature of his injuries and questioned whether those injuries could have been caused by a fall. This prompted the police to search Kevin's house, but they did not find anything of evidentiary value. On October 17, 2023, the results from Kevin's autopsy became available. Kevin did not have any open wounds anywhere on his body. The right side of Kevin's skull had been crushed, and there was a depression in his head that looked like it was caused by a blunt object. All the injuries Kevin sustained were to his head. The impact to his head would have immediately rendered him incapable of walking. If this assessment was correct, it means that Kevin must have been struck in the head while he was at the base of the staircase. He immediately collapsed to the floor. The autopsy report indicated his death was not consistent with falling downstairs. Kevin's cause of death was ruled blunt force trauma. His manner of death was homicide. The police believe that Alison must have struck Kevin multiple times in his head with a blunt object, a baseball bat, a golf club, a dumbbell, or something similar. On December 22, 2023, Alison Davis was arrested and charged with murder. Her trial started on May 6, 2025. 3 days later, on May 9, Alison Davis was found not guilty. The jury had deliberated for 6 hours before reaching this verdict. Now moving to my analysis. Alison Davis maintained her innocence, and she was found not guilty. Her supporters argued that it was painfully obvious that she was innocent. Charges should have never been brought against her. The case was ridiculous, reckless, and indicative of incompetent investigators and prosecutors. The state, of course, disagreed, arguing that their case may have been deeply and tragically flawed, but somehow Alison must have killed her husband, Kevin. This brings me to the question, was Alison guilty of murder? Let's take a look at the evidence both for and against the idea that she was guilty, starting with the inculpatory factors. Alison Davis indicated that she and her husband had argued not long before his death. This is why she was sleeping on the couch. Some people who knew Alison and Kevin claimed there were concerns about their marriage, like maybe things weren't going so well and they were headed for separation or divorce. The police believed that the 911 call placed by Alison sounded rehearsed, and she behaved strangely when emergency responders arrived at the scene. She didn't appear to be as upset as they would have expected, and even laughed with the medics. A medical expert for the state testified that he believed Kevin had been beaten to death. Kevin sustained blows to both sides of his head and the back of his head. This expert argued that the post cap was clean, so Kevin hitting his head against it was not a credible explanation. Kevin's body temperature was 91.6 degrees when he was found, so he must have been dead for at least 2 hours before the 911 call. Alison indicated that she called 911 right after hearing a loud noise, which was presumably Kevin falling down the staircase. Alison's story was that she was on the couch and Kevin was sleeping upstairs. Allegedly, she told her mother-in-law that she and Kevin were sleeping in the bedroom together. Kevin fell while going downstairs to get a drink of water. Also, Alison allegedly told a different story to her brother-in-law, saying that she was in bed while Kevin was moving around the house. Moving to the exculpatory factors, even if there were a few problems in the marriage between Alison and Kevin, there was no obvious motive for Alison to kill him. That's a pretty drastic step, even if somebody's having difficulties in their marriage. Kevin had been drinking not long before his death. Being intoxicated increases one's risk of falling down a staircase. The police never found a murder weapon. The investigation they conducted was horribly mismanaged. Among other problems, they released the scene, which resulted in the blood being cleaned up. It seems unlikely that Alison would attempt to kill her husband with a blunt-force object. He weighed 219 pounds. Furthermore, the state's theory of the crime involves Alison dragging Kevin across the floor after killing him in order to put his body at the bottom of the staircase, like she wanted to position his body somewhere where she could explain the death other than revealing the murder. A medical expert for the defense testified that Kevin died from a single impact to the head, which led to multiple fractures. He sustained the injury after falling down the stairs and hitting his head on the post cap. As far as the low body temperature of 91.6 degrees, this could be explained by damage to Kevin's hypothalamus, which regulates body temperature. The state's medical expert argued that the post cap was clean, as if this proved that Kevin did not hit his head on the post cap. Kevin didn't have any open wounds anywhere on his body. Again, all the blood came from his nose and mouth. He could have hit his head on the post cap and not left any blood on it. When considering all the evidence in this case, do I believe that Alison Davis was guilty of murder? No. In my opinion, she was not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The jury made the right decision. Furthermore, I believe that she is actually innocent in reality. What do I think happened in this case? This is just a theory, my opinion. Unfortunately, Kevin Davis had a habit of drinking alcohol. He spent time at a bar on the night of his death, only to consume more alcohol after arriving home. Being intoxicated was his goal, and his mission was accomplished. When Kevin was coming down the stairs, he lost his footing and fell. This was probably due to the intoxication. He traveled some distance before impact, which meant that his head was moving pretty quickly. Kevin slammed his head on the post cap and sustained a fatal injury. The police did not think that Alison murdered Kevin until the ER staff expressed concerns about the nature of Kevin's injuries. This made investigators pay more attention to Alison's behavior. They came to believe that every little thing that she did somehow pointed to her guilt, like laughing with the medics and not seeming to be upset by her husband's death. The police were engaging in a cognitive distortion called mind reading. They failed to understand how people can react in many different ways to trauma. There is no correct response. Many different reactions can be equally appropriate. Alison's behavior was not indicative of murder. Observations that had no evidentiary value were regarded as important clues. For instance, the police believed it was significant that Kevin's last text message contained the words, "Gotta go to bed, the wife." If he had texted, "Gotta go to bed, the sandwich," would the police have searched the house for a homicidal pastrami on rye? Alison made a critical mistake by talking to the police. She admitted that she had been arguing with Kevin. The police latched onto this as well. It is understandable that the police would have suspected Alison. There have been a few cases where the discovery of a dead spouse at the bottom of a staircase leads to a conviction. The problem with the investigators here is that they did not abandon this theory when the evidence failed to support it. They pushed this case all the way to charging Alison with murder. This was done even though they knew the accidental fall explanation was viable. The investigators and prosecutors involved in this case should consider a different line of work. In my opinion, pursuing this case was consistent with being incompetent, reckless, illogical, and having zero critical thinking skills. Fortunately, the jury had better reasoning skills than the state. One of the jury members was interviewed by the media after the not guilty verdict. She indicated that the state offered no convincing evidence at all and no theory about how Alison carried out the alleged crime. This is a harsh indictment of the state's behavior. Now moving to my final thoughts. This case offers yet another reminder of why it's always a bad idea to speak with the police. Alison probably did not view herself as a suspect because she knew there was no crime. Maybe she thought there was no harm in telling the police what happened. She learned the hard way that anything a citizen says to the police can and will be used against them, even if the police have to twist the words into a pretzel to fulfill that promise. Those are my thoughts in the case of Alison and Kevin Davis. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon.